see some movement at the takeoff zone. It's Kelly Slater grabbing rail. A clean entry. This thing holding open. It spits.
When it spit me, I thought it was going to spit me off my board.
Comes out with the spit, spits him out.
Comes out after the spit.
Gets spat out of another good-looking wave here.
Spit.
We're just spitballing, right? Yeah, I got.
Check 1, 2.
Check.
We're recording.
Oh my, yeah, guy, David, yeah, guy. Heck yes, it's a crisp and clear fall morning here in Southern California, October 30th, the day before Halloween. And this is Spit. We talk all things surf. David Lee Scales, Scott Bass with you here. And good morning, David.
Good morning, Scott. I like the cold. How do you feel about it getting fall weather?
I'm pretty excited about the surf. There's some crispy offshores and some peaky little wedges, a combination of wind swell and south swell. And we've got a hard out this morning.
Good. No, I agree. Like there's been a new kind of energy the last week or two in the water, and it feels good. And I actually like the chill too. It's not, the water's, not frigid yet. The air's cold, but the change in the season is what I like.
Yeah. I totally agree. And everybody, I think in Southern California, I can't speak for all of our global listeners, but the fall here in the Northern Hemisphere seems to be a time of excitement. New wetsuits, new boards, new swells, winter's coming, power, you feel it. And it's already happening. I mean, we have as you know, we had a low pressure move down the coast. There's another one coming tomorrow. So the Northern Hemisphere, at least, up here for us in California is, it's kind of, it's beginning to wake up. And the neat thing is the Southern Hemisphere has not given up. So there's swell energy all over the place.
A couple follow-ups from last week. How's the Kelly book?
The Kelly book is wonderful. It's just a glorious pictorial by 𝗕𝗿𝗄𝗄𝗓. And is it Glazer or Glasser? I always
Glazer
Todd. He's a wonderful human. And it's a great book, and it sits, we have one of these, like, I don't know what you call it. It's like a mantle place for books as you walk into one of our rooms, like you would see in a church or something.
Like it's on a 45-degree angle.
Yeah. And it's tall, like something that, anyway, it's there. And, frankly, that picture of his follow through, his finish and his golf swing might be the best picture in the book. It's incredible the way that finish, the way his wrists, or he's got his wrists, he just completely finished the golf swing. And yeah.
Is there much text in the book?
A little bit, but
captions mainly.
Let me say this. The captions are by Kelly. It's a great, like if you're looking for a gift item for somebody, perfect gift for the gifting season that's upon us.
Coffee table books are something I don't like buying for myself either, just because of the price. So it's nice to get as a gift.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool book for sure.
Very cool. I had another follow-up from last week, or actually two additional follow-ups from last week.
Yeah.
I was telling you about the natural selection event that's going to be happening. Remember that?
Vaguely.
Natural selection. They do a snowboard. Travis Rice does the snowboarding events. Rob Machado's involved. They're doing a surf event in Micronesia in February. You're like, what's the tone of the event? Who's coming? Like, blah. Natural Selection posted an Instagram a day or two ago asking their followers, who do you want to be invited to this event? Which I thought was actually the best possible way to structure the event.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You want to keep, inclusion, get your fan base included. I think that's cool. And you and I mentioned, who we would want, right? And the number of people that we would want. So we've put in our 2 cents.
And go into their Instagram account and, let your influence be known.
Yeah. You know who I want in the event? Steph Gilmore, Mason Ho, and Tom Curren.
Must see moment, dude. I
know, mine too.
Should we go straight
Laser
to
Breathing Dragons must see moment presented by TreesWax.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, let's start with it then. Totally agree. I guess my first question is Vaughn Blakey one of the best filmmakers currently, surf filmmakers?
I mean, I'm not really an expert to speak to that. I love what he's doing. Is he one of the best? That would require me to kind of be more engaged in the complete.
That's your job. That's why we're here.
You know what? I do consume surf media, but I don't, you know, I can tell you that Lonesome Dove is perhaps one of the greatest books ever written, but.
Well, Vaughn Blakey did, of course, Free Scrubber.
Yes.
He did that Postcards from Morgan a year or two prior to that. The greatest surf movie in the universe came out recently. Not as great, in my opinion. But these, like, that thing was hyped and had a big budget. These other videos he just drops on us intermittently through Rip Curl. They come out of nowhere. There was no hype around it. And it was so amazing. It was so unexpected and just phenomenal and everything I want, because at the end of it, I was amped to surf.
Well, my take on it is that what we get is a lot of absolute ripping with style, right? Yeah. Which everyone loves. There's zero surfing for points in this video. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. I believe subconsciously, excuse me while I turn off my phone. Subconsciously, we notice it when somebody is surfing for points. If you scroll through your Insta and you see a thing and you can just kind of, it's not the first thing that jumps out at you, but subconsciously you're like, that guy's trying to score points. And it's a bit of a turnoff. And with Mason, Steph, and Tom Curren, you do not see any of that. These people are just, it's kind of what Steph says at the beginning of the film, and I'm going to misrepresent exactly what she says, but it's basically like, I want to go fast, I want to rip, and I want to surf with style, or something along those. There's no mention of, or go ahead.
She doesn't even say rip. She just says fast with style. That's it.
Yeah. And I think that's what we all want as surfers, like that's what it's all about. And like I said, there's zero surfing for points in this video, which is like, again, subconsciously, I think we all go, wow, that's cool. Like that's important. It's authentic.
Well, along those lines, a number of kind of slow-mo and zoom-ins that they included in the edit were just kickouts. You know what I mean? And that illustrates the style element too. Like, there is style to a kickout. Like, the way that they do it is just expresses so much personality. Aside from looking good, it expresses personality, but there's 0 points attached to that in a contest, but we love to see it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And in some ways, it kind of reminds me of that swatch thing they did in the wave pool. Like, you don't sense that they're surfing for points. Those guys are just having so much fun.
True.
And I forget what it was called, like Nine Lights, or
the Nines event.
Nines, something like that. Anyway, the video drops that I saw on Zeke's and some other IG accounts was just pure fun,
Speaking of pure fun, and back to Vaughn Blakey.
Yeah.
Vaughn Blakey and Nick Paulette. I should mention Nick Paulette too, because he co-directed. But the fact that they get Tom Curren to participate in these skits as a soup salesman is incredible, or then he cuts to him shredding the guitar so hard that laser beams are flying out of it, it turns into a flamethrower. Like, it is so funny, and it's just entertaining, but it's hilarious. And Tom's turns out to be a great actor. Him in these skits is actually really good. So
yeah, it is fun. Like, it's just fun, like, you're right.
Salesman,
you don't want to get too into like film critique at this point, like they're just having a good time and rolling with it. And
but the funny thing is, when that scene happened, it was early in the film, so I expected there's some sort of narrative arc. There wasn't. There was no follow-up. There was no, like, it was literally Tom with a cart selling soup, and Steph and Mace drive by, and they're like, Tom, what are you doing? Let's go surf. And he's like, I can't. Gotta sell some soup. They're like, what? With soup? He's like, yeah, it's delicious. Do you want to buy some soup?
I need some questions answered by Vaughn and Nick, because, you get this like Apocalypse Now, Heart of Darkness, going down the river thing at the beginning. And you would hope that they would connect that narrative, even as silly as it is, throughout. And they kind of do, but then they go to the soup thing, and this is why I would love some clarity, because you sense that Vaughn and Nick, somehow that soup thing is tied into something that they've seen somewhere else that I didn't make the connection. Like, it might even be like a skit in a sitcom in Australia or something But all of a sudden, Colonel Kurtz is selling soup, you know?
Maybe, but it's not, there's no third act. There's not even
Right.
a second act, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just, but it's hilarious. And Tom is hilarious. And Mason's response on camera, like him laughing, seemed like they were almost doing it off the cuff, you know, like he didn't anticipate. It was hilarious. And so I liked it. But then again, I expected there to be some sort of follow-up connection in the storyline. There wasn't. It just went to shredding from that point on. So all of it, and I'm not saying that as a critique. I loved that about it, the fact that it was nonsensical. And speaking of Tom Curren, his surfing is still as relevant as ever. And it's not old man relevant. It's like he's cracking the lip. He's in critical positions. It's incredible.
I was checking out his board. His board looks really good. And I don't know, there's one turn at the very beginning where you can see kind of the width of the tail. It looked like it was like a squash tail, and it looked nice and wide, which those of us of the elder region appreciate, you know. We're down the deeper, darker side of the year spectrum.
Yeah.
And I like a little width in my tail, man. I need a little, give me the speed. Don't make me have to get to speed. I want speed right away.
I'm not afraid of a wide tail either.
Yeah.
And his foot often, he's far up on the board in a lot of it. Like I was kind of surprised to see how far his foot was away from the tail.
You know who's the king of that too? Is watch the tubes that Mason gets. How many times Mason moves up to the front of his board like he's on an old single fin. That's just from surfing on older, you know, not older equipment, but yeah, I guess older equipment. Surfing those single fins.
Mason makes that adjustment after the bottom turn. Like he's pumping off the bottom turn, and before his board gets up and adjusts into the tube, he scoots up in that little moment, which is the most critical moment ever. It's incredibly timed.
Surfing with style, messy moment. Laser breathing dragons presented by Trees Wax.
Stephanie Gilmore, perhaps the best surfing I've seen from Steph in a very long time.
Yeah.
And this is what we hoped for when we said Steph's taken some time off tour. Maybe she'll come back, maybe she won't. But in that time off, I would love to see her go on the search and produce some free surf clips. And this is what she did.
Yeah.
You hear me, Felipe? By the way, the Birch Pickle Fork, I am claiming right now, is the new Kelly Slater elf-shoed rocker thin potato chip shortboard from our 90s, where it's only a pro should be riding it. Like when you see that board, it's obviously it was Birch riding it first. Then we saw the Bryce Young clips. Mikey Wright.
Hold on. We gotta pull the covers over the truth here. The Pickle Fork was designed by Jeff Alexander in the 80s. And there was guys around San Diego that were riding Jeff's Pickle Fork, and I think it's a disservice to him to not acknowledge him as the Pickle Fork guy. He was the guy. It would be like not acknowledging Will Jobson for the Twinser. And Jeff Alexander is, and he calls it the Gemini. That's his name for it. Everyone calls it the Pickle Fork. Jeff Alexander. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. My distinction, we've had this conversation before, but for the record, Stephanie Gilmore is riding the Pickle Fork. Ryan Birch has a model called the Pickle Fork.
Right.
Jeff Alexander's model is called the Gemini. So Stephanie Gilmore is riding a Birch Pickle Fork model Birch.
Yes.
And we saw Birch riding that, and you know, at Cloud Break a number of years ago when it was big, and you're like, holy cow, he's on a different level. Saw Bryce Young riding it, and you're thinking Bryce Young's unlocking levels of surfing I haven't seen before. We saw Mikey Wright produce a couple of clips a couple of years ago at Rocky Wright's with an extra little bit of pizzazz and kind of tighter turning radius, let's say, because those boards are kind of narrow. Then Stephanie Gilmore gets on it, and it does the same thing for her surfing. But we all made the mistake in the 90s of seeing Kelly Slater surf like that. And so everybody went out and tried to design that style of board, ride those style of boards, intermediate surfers trying to ride those boards, beginners riding those boards. And it hampered everybody's learning curve for a decade. Same thing goes to that Pickle Fork. I guarantee, and the good news is you probably can't get one, even if you thought you could ride one, but it is a high performance Ferrari for F1 racing.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. But I would also say, hey, give it a try. It's not that difficult. And by the way, it's wider. It doesn't look wide, but and some of them might not be that wide, but the ones that Jeff was making were pretty wide. I mean, it has two noses. It's got to be a little bit wider. You know what I mean?
I'm talking about the birch one though.
Birches are narrower. I agree. You're right.
I went there. I went to LSD one time and they had like a batch of them for Mikey Wright.
Yeah.
And I like held them. They were like 17 inches wide.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, don't mark my words, but that's what it felt like to me. And then even when you ride him, when you see him riding them, you can kind of see that. I was like, these things won't even float me, you know, like forget about getting to my feet. I can't even catch a wave on this thing.
Yeah.
But that's where you see for that level of surfer, the extra turning radius. Like Stephanie Gilmore looks like wherever her eyes go, that's what the board's there instantly. She's like, bang, cracking the lip. She looks back to the bottom and boom, she's down to the bottom and she's looking up at the lip and wow, boom, back up into it. Speed galore, no hitch in between. It's the best surfing I've seen her do in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. It was inspiring to watch all three of them surf. It was super. It's a super fun edit. You know, it's just fun. It's light. It's easy. It's fun, and it's stylish ripping without surfing for points.
14 minutes long, not too long. It's perfect.
Yeah, I mean,
great call.
That's like also some follow up from last time. I don't know if you want to get into it because it's a bit in the of a deep dive into the weeds, but the email that we received from Craig Larson about flax.
Do it.
Well, I'm just going to read a little bit of his email and try not to get too into the weeds. But first of all, let me tell you that Craig's an expert in composite raw materials. So he knows what he's talking about. And here's what he mentioned. He said, hey, enjoyed your flax discussion. On flax for composite use in general, it's really hard to compare strength properties to fiberglass for a couple of reasons. So you can't compare flax to fiberglass. There's a bunch of white papers, blah, blah, blah. But in general, flax is not as strong as fiberglass. But a composite is a combination of materials, not just one. And so calling a surfboard a flax surfboard isn't telling the whole story. And in regular composite, a combination, we would never recommend using flax in a wet layup manufacturing method. In other words, you know, hand laminating versus a vacuum bag. So a wet layup is hand laminating versus vacuum bagging or other processes. And that's because flax is like a sponge. It'll soak up a lot of extra resin. One of the reasons it's so hard to compare the strength of flax to fiberglass is because fiberglass usually would take up less resin, but a flax laminate flips that and becomes 40% flax, 60% resin. And in a wet layup, the resin content even goes higher. One of the basic things of a composite is the resin is typically the weak point of the composite. At the same time, resin typically does better on compression than fiberglass or any fibers, actually. So guys like Jeff Timpone and Nick have clearly figured out how to work with flax to get the right resin content, but it probably took them a lot of time to get it right. And so, again, you know, it's kind of a deep dive into, you know, some stuff that's kind of beyond the average listener and myself, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring that up.
Very interesting. And also illuminates how much work goes into the R&D for guys like Gary McNeil or the Timpones who have been working with it for such a long time. Also illustrates why I think surfboard construction has stagnated for such a long time.
Yeah.
Is the economics of the business are such that there isn't a lot of extra capital to invest in strictly R&D projects. You're kind of operating with very little profit to even grow your business, much less invest in innovation.
Yeah, totally agree. It would be one thing if, say, for instance, Boeing was creating surfboards and there was only, you know, 4 surfboard manufacturers and they were all mega corps, you know, global international corporations, and they had an R&D budget to create an entire line of flax, you know, composite, perfectly figured out surfboards. And, you know, the nature, as you mentioned, of the surfboard industry, it's just a lot of these small little glass houses that are just trying to like deal with their razor thin margins and get it through. And they don't want to, there's no need for changes because everyone likes what we're riding, and just look at what Steph's doing. You know, like people are still ripping on the way we've been doing it for, 4 or 5 decades now. So change very slow, if any.
So important to have as your kind of guiding light sustainability for people like the Tymponis or McNeil or Rasta, so that you can prioritize those types of projects over profit.
Yeah. And to do justice to Craig, I didn't read all of his email, but he goes into more of it. But suffice to say that there's a lot of minutia that goes into creating a proper composite surfboard, which would be flax and fiberglass and whatever core, be it EPS or poly or whatever you're using. So it's just not as simple. I think Craig, the bottom line is Craig's email was like, it's not as simple as just throwing some flax and some resin together on a wet lamination and getting a quote unquote flax surfboard.
So my initial thought with that is, man, Stab really led, like not led us astray, but they created this kind of headline and overarching theme that makes a big splash, but one layer under it, you realize that's not exactly the truth behind the headline. But that my second thought is that's okay. That was not what they were intending to do. And furthermore, they're at least bringing forward this conversation for something that is important to spend more time R&Ding basically, and to invest in. And so, and I think they've even stated on episode 2, we're not experts. We're just learning along the way too. Here's a innovation that these 2 guys made over in Australia that they've had success with. So we're going to examine that further. And so now they're peeling back the layers, and that's how we get to this layer.
Yeah. And I'm still very interested in it. I think the bottom line here is that a flax composite surfboard is going to be strong, but your average board builder guy might not have done the years of research that the Tymponis or many others, including Gary McNeil, have done. So if you're going to get one, go to somebody that absolutely knows the space, not somebody that's like, yeah, I don't know, let's give it a try. To me, that's like not the guy. You want to go to Gary McNeil, you want to go to the Tymponis, you want to go to the guys that understand that composite space, specifically flax and fiberglass and vacuum bagging and is it EPS, blah, 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 so go to somebody who knows.
Totally agree. Grateful to have those people, because man, I am not gifted in those ways, in that engineering mindset.
I know I'm not either. I have a incredible dark arts that I just got that is one of these composite layups. It's fascinating. It's got carbon, it's got Kevlar, it's got EPS down the middle and polyurethane on the sides. And it's just, Justin Tiernes at Dark Arts is such a wizard and just knows so much and has done so much, decades of R&D on this stuff that, and I'm in love with the board. The board just goes so good. And by the way, I had big twin fin side fins in this Twinser, took them out just because why not? Let's try something else. I put the C drive twins in it. Oh my, okay. I'm so psyched on those C drive twins in my Twinser from Naked Vikings that the board just, it added a little spark, a little flare, where it might have been a little stiff. Now it's way more flary and it just feels really good.
And you still have the side bites?
Yeah, the canards are still in front. Yeah, the Twinser canards.
Yeah, I got to say, man, every once in a while I go off the C drives and I try something else, and whenever I put them back in, it's the right fin.
I know, and they're as you know, they're sort of funky looking. Whatever, I don't really care, but I wouldn't ride them just for the sake of, oh, look at the guy with the funky fins in his board. Like if they didn't work, I don't give a crap. I'm going to put in something that works. The bottom line is they work so friggin' good that I can't not ride them.
I know. So I have them as a thruster. The thruster set isn't as universally great as the twin fin set. Like sometimes I've had a different set of thruster fins that I like just as much as the C drives. I haven't identified a deficit to them, but I have had other fins that I felt like work just as good. But with the twins specifically, whenever I have a twin fin and then I put the C drives in, it's better.
I agree. I'm sold.
Me
I'm kind
too.
of at the point where it's like, I don't, that's the default. The C
Yeah,
drives are the
exactly.
default position.
For any twin fin style
Yeah.
board that I have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's all on Flax, but while we're on the subject of twin fins, I just want to acknowledge William Aliotti held a Twin Fin Invitational on the beach breaks of France this past week, and it didn't really get a lot of hype because they weren't live streaming the event. But I like seeing these homegrown events. I know Justin Quintal is doing a longboard version. Jeremy obviously did the 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗃 Fest with 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗃 as a partner, but Williams is much more low key. He got his sponsors involved, I think, just to kind of help support the event, but there wasn't prize money, there wasn't a big production or anything like that. But the invite list is epic. He's got Chippa Wilson there, Ozzy Wright, Tosh Tudor, Mackenzie Bowden, Asher Pacey, Kobe Hughes, Victor Bernardo won the event riding a twin fin. Brinkley Davies, Jalissa Vincent, and then Ragland Surf Report, Luke Cederman showed up as well.
That's cool.
Really, really great list of invites. And the
Yeah.
surfing, the waves obviously at this time of year are just really reliable and fun and good. But so that was great to see. But the surfing was just over the top. So the only place I saw it was on Instagram. Periodically, those invitees would post something. And it's epic to see. Just getting together, having an event like that, homegrown.
I mean, that list you mentioned could be the like the list for 𝗕𝗔𝗍's event. What's that event called again?
Natural Selection.
Natural Selection. Like that's a list of surfers that I would like to see on Natural Selection.
Totally.
I love Victor Bernardo and Tosh Tudor together in an event. When Asher Pacey, like what a great. There's so many. What's the word I want to use? Just like well-rounded, I guess, surfers out there that aren't necessarily like QS guy with the jersey on, that are just beautiful to watch.
And that's to your point about laser breathing dragons. They weren't surfing for points.
Right.
And that's why it's so much more appealing to watch, is an event that doesn't have points attached to it. And watching Victor surf, I mean, Victor is really one of the better free surfers of our last year or two or three.
Yeah.
His style, of course, is incredible, but he does really high performance surfing. He's riding those let's call them alternative high performance boards.
Yeah.
But, lots of times you see, let's say, as soon as you shift your mind into the alternative world and you see maybe Torren Martin or maybe even Michael February, they're drawing beautiful lines on the wave, but it's distinctly different than, quote, high performance surfing that you see 𝗵𝐵 Toledo doing. Victor Bernardo has an incredible blend of both.
This is an interesting thing that needs to be excavated.
The terms?
Because, yeah, like the idea that what 𝗵𝐵 Toledo is doing is high performance, and what Victor Bernardo or even Tosh Tudor or even Torren Martin is doing isn't high performance. I mean, I get where you're going with it. There does need to be some differentiation. How do you say that? Between those two things, right? And I don't know exactly how we excavate this, but when you look at 𝗵𝐵's surfing, you know that he's doing critical, high speed, high action, gouging, radical turns. And aren't those other guys?
So yes, that's not the distinction for me. The distinction comes with liftoff. The distinction comes from disconnecting the rail, I guess, is what it would be. So 𝗵𝐵's power turns, gouges, not that those are low performance, they're still high performance, but they're based in traditional surfing. Once he leaves the air or once he blows the tail out, that's where I start applying the term high performance, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, and maybe that's where I need to adjust, because maybe I'm just like old guy, but I feel like an engaged rail is pretty much the epitome of great surfing. And
well, great is a different word though. Again,
Yeah, of high performance surfing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get to this place where it's like, first of all, the airs that I saw at that Swatch event were insane. Like the stuff that those guys, Matt Miola and Zeke and whoever else was at that thing. So I love the air game. I think it's fascinating. I'm into it. And maybe I'm just nitpicking here, but it feels like a fully engaged buried rail is the epitome of high performance surfing. But it can't be if we're saying that, well, the next level is out here above and beyond, which I believe it is, quite frankly. I do. I guess it's apples and oranges, but maybe the listeners can help us, or just me. I won't speak for you.
You're right.
Maybe I'm just an old guy.
No, you're right. I am using the word high performance because I haven't taken the time to figure out a different word to use, but you're right. Big, fast power gouging has always been the epitome of high performance. It was, no matter what style of board you were riding, if you could do that, that was high performance, and it still is. I'm using it to distinguish into like I said, leaving the wave face. And that isn't a fair distinction because you're right. You could do a high performance rail turn as well. So I need to figure out a different word for, what I'm referring to as Felipe doing differently than Torren Martin. But my original point is that Victor Bernardo blends both.
Yes.
Victor Bernardo and the boards, the style of boards that he's riding, I think allow him to do that kind of get through soft sections or flat sections with ease and glide, and then still allow him to do an alley-oop on a twin fin on a beach break in France, which he did an incredible one in this event, which you wouldn't see Torren Martin do.
Yeah. I guess it's just kind of nitpicking because when you think about Felipe and what he did at J-Bay a few years ago and the way he's connecting his aerials, it's just mind blowing and definitely next level, maybe next level instead of high performance, next level surfing.
But it's last year's level. It's not the next level because Felipe did that like 8 years ago. So yeah, we got to figure out a new term. Listeners, shout out. What are we referring to here?
Yeah. Next level surfing. You don't like
laser breathing dragon surfing.
Exactly.
That's what I love about Vaughn Blakey too, is the titles that he picks are out of left field.
Well, right now, if we look at Vaughn Blakey movies, I'm going to suggest to you that the greatest moment is at the end of Free Scrubbers when Tom just picks that thing up from the sand and goes, "It's a free scrubber."
You're right. Free.
So
it's a scrubber.
God bless Vaughn for trying to that's a high watermark to meet, and he's trying, and I'm more power to him. Keep him coming, buddy.
I mean, truly, he didn't. I guess in this conversation, we're trying to create qualitative stratas. Like, this is better than that. There's no need.
There's no need, Scott.
There's no need.
Leave it alone.
Yeah, it's Free Scrubber's amazing. Laser Breathing Dragons is amazing. Doing an air is amazing. Doing a rail gouge is amazing.
It's like the Academy Awards. There's so many great album movies that don't even get recognized. I
know.
So,
but you know what beats them both? Barrels. Beats airs and beats doing.
Thank you. You know what? Free Scrubber is sort of like The Godfather 1, and then Laser Breathing Dragons. It's hard to. Is it The Godfather 2 or is it Godfather 3, which is good, but nowhere close to Godfather 1 or Godfather 2?
Let's hope he produces 10 Godfathers.
Bring it.
I've
got a Who Said That. Why don't we take a quick break and then I'll come back with a Who Said That.
I'm ready. HelloFresh.com/freesurf. Surfing, food, and wine, those are my passions that occupy my time and my headspace. But as adulthood and fatherhood has demanded more and more of my time, the act of surfing has gone from a daily exercise to a weekly thing. And the same thing has applied with shopping for meals. It's so consuming, and honestly, it's a bit wasteful. Whether it's buying a jar of something that I only need a tablespoon of, or maybe just a bunch of celery when I only need 2 stalks of it. An embarrassing amount of groceries either go into the trash at the end of the week or they just rot in the cupboard for a year until I do a deep cleaning. So HelloFresh has really simplified and streamlined our dinner life with pre-portioned ingredients delivered right to our door. These are restaurant quality, easy to make meals with simple instructions, and it's also less expensive and healthier than any takeout that we order. And they have over 50 different recipes to choose from each week. The menus are seasonal. So this week we have autumn-inspired dishes like shepherd's pie if you want something filling, or there was an herbed salmon over apple and kale salad that was great last week. We also loved the creamy cilantro flank steak bowl with garlic lime rice and charred greens. And again, this is all delivered to our door, pre-portioned, and it's easy to make. So go to hellofresh.com/freesurf to sign up. We will get you 10 free meals applied across 7 boxes. That's for new subscribers only, and it varies by plan, but it is 10 free great restaurant quality meals just by going to hellofresh.com/freesurf. It is America's #1 meal kit for a reason, and in fact, one that I have been using since 2017, believe it or not. So that's hellofresh.com/freesurf.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Who said that, David? I've got a who said that. This is the segment where I try to stump David. I break out a quote from a famous surfer, and I offer 4 surfers who perhaps said this, and then David tries to guess. David, who said that? Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Regarding shaping, you get it the way I shape it, or it's no dice. You don't tell the shaper how to shape the board. You tell the shaper how you want to surf, then bail and let him do it. David, who said that? Is it A, Richie Collins, B, Peter Schroff, C, 𝗕𝗏 Fitzgerald, or D, Mike Croteau?
First of all, it's very difficult. This is just a shot in the dark with that quote. That quote did not leave a lot of identifiers.
I apologize. You're right.
No,
You're
other
right.
than just kind of personality. I'm going to go 𝗕𝗏 Fitzgerald.
You're wrong. It's Richie Collins. The reason I bring it up is because of your great Surf Splendor interview with Richie recently, and I thought you would get it because of that, and that's why I made it kind of a difficult one. I didn't give any, God comments or anything like that. So Richie Collins, the way you shape it is the way you get it, or it's no dice.
If you would have said Lance Collins, I would have picked Lance.
Yes, they're cut from the same cloth, right? Apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
No, it doesn't. Did you happen to listen to any of that interview by any chance?
I didn't. I apologize, but you continue to get fascinated. I bet it's one of your better ones because he's generally opinionated and open. Like he's an open book and he doesn't hold back.
What a wild ride, dude.
Tell me a little bit. What's the highlight?
So I'll give you the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I reached out to him because he'd be a great interview, right?
Yes.
So that's why I reached out. But realistically, as an interviewer, I wanted to know 2 main lines of questioning: his relationship with his dad, 1, and his relationship with his daughter, number 2.
Wow.
But he's such a volatile character that I wasn't comfortable, and I've never met him before, so I wasn't comfortable asking those things. I was going to go into the interview and then decide, number 1, if it was possible that I could ask that, and then number 2, navigate how I could do it tactfully, right? And to his credit, I did not have to ask either, and he fully divulged both.
Right.
And so what I realized pretty quickly on, and I talked to some people, mutual friends, before going into the interview to kind of gauge where he was at in his life, to figure out like how open he might be. And they all really led me astray a little bit. Their experiences with him are accurate and true, I'm sure, and authentic. But I think Richie entered the interview knowing that I have a media platform and he wanted to engage in that platform. So he was very, very gracious with his time and his candor and all that sort of stuff. I think that he clearly has ego, and nobody from the surf world is asked to interview him for 20 plus years. So he was eager to share anything and everything. And he could not believe that I was letting him go. You know, like that I wasn't. I think there's a lot of interviewers, especially if you're going to print, you're like, I only have to do 1,500 words. Like, I'm out of here in 15 minutes. I was like, brother, go deep. Like, go on. I'm here all day. You have me. And so he did. He did 3 hours, actually.
Rad.
Yeah. And he did everything from like, you know, his family's history in California, and they own like tons of land, and that land, they lost it during the Depression. And like, he cried, I think 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the interview. It was just really, I thought I was really engaged. But the crazy thing was, and again, beforehand, he was like handshake, like thrilled. Thank you for coming. When I left, he was the same way, super gracious. And he's been that way ever since. Like, since we published the interview, we've had a lot of conversations, and he's very, very grateful. But I went home that night utterly exhausted. Like, I was on the sofa. I'm like, man, why am I so tired? I even said it to Lauren. I was like, why am I so tired? I didn't even like get any exercise today. And then I realized, or she realized, she goes, well, in the last 90 minutes that you've been home, all you've been doing is talking about Richie Collins. I was exhausted. I was emotionally spent from listening to, it was like being in a therapy session almost, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So,
amazing. Well,
really,
good.
really interesting.
I mean, that's the kind of guy, right? You're like, okay, it's kind of like, you know, I can almost, there's certain guys, and you know this too, where you're like, that's going to be, I'm anticipating a very good interview. Like, for instance, Sonny Garcia is like that, I sense, you know, like he's just going to go and just like, he's going to blurt it all out. And Richie's like that. And there are various guys that are like that. And then there's guys that, you know, are coming into it just with an agenda, and they're professional communicators, and they're going to say this and that, and they're not going to go over there. And frankly, those are boring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally. Well,
yeah.
the other catch, just to pull the curtain back for the listeners, I've done a couple of interviews over the years where then there's a bit of cleanup after the fact, maybe in editing, but then also damage control. Like, I got to publish this, but it's going to piss a couple people off. And, you know, there was one fairly recently that it's like, I have to publish it out of just like integrity. But God, I have friends that are going to be pissed about this. And so then you're fielding those phone calls for the next week or two, like trying to make things right, make amends, and explain, you know, whatever. And so that was my concern with this, is I was like, for the listener, I have to publish it. Again, integrity. But I'm going to have to, you know, that he's going to piss some people off. But to be honest, that's how I felt going into it. But to be honest, when I was done recording, I'm like, I don't think he's going to piss anybody off other than maybe his dad. But, you know, there was a lot of humility, strange juxtaposition. There was a lot of humility that I think was sincere, you know, regret about how he raised his daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
But then right under that, there's a bunch of ego still there. So it'd be like sincere, authentic regret and kind of a position of humility. And then the next sentence is like, but if that mother effer gets in my way again, I'm going to, you know, kind of a thing.
That's a fascinating look at the human condition, you know.
It is, yeah.
It's, and that's what makes a great interview, right? When you see both of those sides, and it's the constant struggle, right? Like, you know, our ego and where we think we belong within the social stratification. It's just, well, so good for you. I knew it was going to be a good one when I saw it. I went, oh, wow, this is going to be a home run, you know.
He's still in progress, to your point.
Yeah.
That's the interesting
But we all
thing.
are, I think. You know?
Always. Yeah. Always. I mean, hopefully you always are.
And that's the beautiful thing about getting a guy at his age. Like, he's basically my age. He's probably his late 50s or early 50s or whatever. And there's so much reflection that we do. I can't speak for everyone my age, but that I've done as you go from 50 to 60, there's tons of reflection. Obviously, your kids go off to college, things change in your life, and you get to look at things from a I want to say a better perspective, like a more learned perspective, or perhaps I'm not going to use, I'll say wiser perspective, because you've experienced so many things that you generally, that aged person is going to give a pretty good interview because of that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I've said this to you before on air. I've said it somewhere, but I heard Norman Lear interviewed at the age of 85. Do you know who Norman Lear
I
was?
love no All in the Family.
Right. So television producer, famous, super successful. I heard him interviewed. He's since passed, but 8 years ago, I heard him interviewed at age 85. And in that interview, he goes, God, I wish I knew at age 80 what I know now.
What a brilliant man. That is so great.
And I mean, that's you look, you're like, I'm in my late 50s. I'm looking back. I got new perspective on things. It's like, dude, wait till you're 65. You're going to
Yeah.
trip at how little you knew at 58, you know?
Well, I definitely don't know much. I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, as soon as you think you know what's going on, it's, I don't know much, but I enjoyed learning and I'm trying to
Well,
do
that's
that.
why I didn't say this to Richie. It felt like maybe he came to this conclusion on his own, I guess. There was some kind of, there was a sadness in the regret for
Yeah.
the stage that he's at currently in his life. But in my mind, what I wanted to say was, dude, you got whole other chapters coming. Like your life is not over. You got a long time to go. And so having a ho-hum depressive outlook is not going to net positive results necessarily during that time. So, shift the perspective. You got a lot to be grateful for, kind of a thing. I'm in no position to give that type of advice to him or anybody else really, but that's kind of what my perspective on it was you've got a long time to go. It's easy to feel like you're spent a lot of time, maybe wasted a lot of time or whatever it is, but
Yeah,
there's still great times ahead potentially.
for sure.
If you
For
make
sure.
it, make it.
Yeah.
Well, along these lines, I watched a couple of films as part of my job for the Florida Surf Film Festival jury. I'm voting on these things. The two that I watched this week that I can kind of tease for you are one is called The Search for Volcano Island, which is about a surf mission up in the Aleutian Islands. And then the second one is the much anticipated life and death of Westerly Windina.
Ooh, I've heard a lot about this lately on Instagram. Go ahead.
Dude, I remember mentioning this to you 10 years ago on air when I think the original trailer for the film dropped. Jamie had written the book, Becoming Westerly, and then was making a documentary film. And there was a trailer that dropped 10 years ago, and we discussed it here. And then it's kind of like been crickets for a long time. And I've talked to Jamie about the status of the film over the years, and he always had an answer, but it's finally being released, and it's going to be screening at the Florida Surf Film Festival. I believe it's November 15th, might be the 16th, but that weekend,
Yeah.
mid-November. So if
Yeah.
you're in Daytona Beach, Florida, come out and see the film. Tom Curren, in fact, is coming to play.
Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be a great event. I'll be there. But the life and death of Westerly Windina, I'll post the trailer in today's show on today's show page in the notes. It's an incredible story. Peter Druan is the amazing surfer from the 60s and 70s. Like when you see that footage, the archival footage that they put in the documentary, he's surfing incredibly.
No, he was one of the top surfers in Australia. I think he got second to Michael Peterson in the Australian Championships. And
Um,
he was just competitively, you didn't mess with him. He was, he was smoking dudes. He was
he,
smoking 𝗏𝗏𝗏.
yeah,
He was beating Petertown, and he didn't, he kind of dropped off the competitive scene after a bit and started, as you know, directing surf contests. He was a
right.
director.
So in that heyday of competition, they show footage of him competing in the Duke at 𝗏𝗏𝗏. He should have won that event. Jeff Hackman won. There was another year where he would have won a world title, but he wasn't invited to surf in the final event because of some hiccup.
Politics.
Yeah, politics, exactly. So like he should have a world title based on the surfing that he was doing, But yeah, disillusioned by professional surfing actually feels like he was really robbed by power brokers in professional surfing at the time. Anyways, then gets into creating events. A surf brand at the time hired him to host a contest. And that's where he invented the man-on-man format.
Hold on. We need some revisionist history.
Okay.
You and I have spoken about this before. Isn't it true that there was a man-on-man event on the East Coast of the United States prior to that Burley Heads event?
I forget everything that we talk about on the show, but you're absolutely right. You did unearth this at some point.
Yeah. Man on Man occurred, I want to say it was at the Florida Pro, but the name of the event I'm probably butchering, but because I've had somebody reach out to me and go, hey man, we did Man on Man heats before the 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏 event. I think the 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏 event was in 78.
Good point. So prior though, traditionally surfing was 6 or 8 guys in the water because again, everybody's at the beach together. There's a swell. They're trying to run an event in a day. So you just want to get as many people competing as possible. But obviously we know the limitations of that format. And so the innovation here was look at heavyweight boxing. You just see the 2 best guys slugging it out. That's what we want to see in surfing. So anyways, that he introduced that format, maybe not for the first time. Then his life, and he was always a showman. This is the point, is he was always the ultimate showman to the point that I think he had a reputation. Some people didn't like him. You know, he's kind of an asshole, let's say. But part of his showmanship, one of the stories they gave that I had not heard before was when he was going to compete in the Gunston 500. Actually, Randy Rarick, first they lead in with Randy Rarick and he were really good friends. Randy had gotten married. Peter comes out to spend time in Hawaii and basically tries to seduce Randy Rarick's wife. That's how much of a Lothario Peter Druan was. And this is words out of
You got
Randy
me.
Rarick's,
I'm watching the movie. You just hooked me.
this is words out of Randy Rarick's own mouth. He's just like, this guy would not quit. And that's why he was, much despised by it. Yeah, exactly. Like he just couldn't have enough of anything. He was just all hedonism. And so tries to seduce my wife. I invite him to come stay at my house and he's trying to seduce my wife. What the heck, Anyways, Druan's response to that was, dude, I just want to find love. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to the Gunston 500. I'm going to take out an ad in the local paper for a wife. And then he rented a hotel suite and held basically a sweepstakes as a dating game. And 50 women showed up and he married the 50th one. Like the first 49 didn't work out. The 50th one, he's like, this chick's it. And so he marries her. She comes back to Australia. That's a whole story. Barton Lynch eventually hires Peter as a coach. Peter then goes and has like a acting career or attempts to have an acting and a screenwriting career and a directing career and all this sort of stuff. Just showman. Ultimately falls out of this pro surfing limelight. Then a news story hits in Australia that he's transitioning to become a woman. So at that time, definitely not an easy thing to do. It still isn't an easy thing to do. A lot of social pushback basically for that. And when they interviewed professional surfers, contemporaries at the time, their response was, look, I'm not convinced this is sincere. Like Peter's always doing some sort of a stunt. And I'm not convinced this isn't a stunt. And so that storyline kind of carried with the whole thing for a while, until Peter goes to Thailand and has gender reassignment surgery. At which point you're like, well, seems sincere to me. Hard to argue at this point, right? But if the title of the film is any indicator, because that's where the book left off, by the way, Becoming Westerly left off in Thailand. That was over a decade ago, probably 15 years ago at this point. And the title of the film is The Life and Death of Westerly Windina. So there is a final chapter in the film that is very different than where the book left off.
Yeah, no, that's how I remember it. 10 years ago, we were like, okay, cool, this is going to be great. And then I think Westerly threw 𝗕𝗵𝗃𝗃 and the filmmakers a full-on curveball, and they're like, we have to hold off here. That this thing isn't finished yet.
Exactly. It's really well done. There's not a ton of surfing. I mean, the archival stuff is very worth watching.
And I don't want any surfing.
Well, interestingly, there's clips of Peter/Westerly now still surfing great.
Sure.
Like surfing mediocre, kind of crappy waves, but you can see, you're like, oh my God, they've still got it,
Yeah. Is he on an ASIN?
No. No.
That was a surfboard joke.
But there's some really, really, really poignant conversations throughout. Like Westerly's brother has a very hard time when Westerly comes back from Thailand with the full gender reassignment surgery. And that is all caught on film and it's like really poignant. So I enjoyed it tremendously.
Cool. That sounds wonderful. That sounds like the kind of surf film that I'm interested in. One that's got deeper issues and characters and yeah.
I
Cool.
kept watching it thinking, could this live on Netflix? And I think it very much can. Like I don't know if it exists on the level of, documentaries that are nominated for Academy Awards and stuff like that, but it definitely is not a surf film.
Yeah. That's good. I think that's
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah. And the search for Volcano Island also, I looked it up. It's not available to view now, but I will remind people when it is. Ben Weiland is the filmmaker on this, and he connected with a group of 5 dudes, a couple of brothers, 2 groups of brothers, and then a friend who saw this image of a perfect wave breaking in front of a volcano somewhere in Alaska. And so they get a boat or hire a boat and get up to Alaska, like the far remote reaches. Like the town they land in is 32 people, and then get on a fishing vessel from there and go in search of waves, and they find good waves. But it really, really illustrates how difficult it is to search for surf, especially by boat, where there's all these islands and they all get different swell directions. And it's like, I'm sure they all have their day, and they all get really good. But when you're just doing it with a lot of this is actually uncharted territory. So when you're doing it that level of kind of on the fringe, you're just showing up at a spot and looking from behind, trying to identify, and a 1-foot wave could look perfect from behind, and a 10-foot wave could look like it's 1 foot from behind. So you really, and then
the boat captain's like, I have no idea what, like, if it's uncharted, they don't know the depths. And so he's like, I'm not going into that little bay. I can never get out of there for all I know.
And it's frigid.
Oh God.
So it's like you got to suit up in a 5 or 6 mil every time you want to go check the waves, and it could be epic tomorrow, but you didn't know that, and you're leaving today, and you could go check. Like it's the level of surf exploration. You could score way, way, way easier going to Hawaii, going to Central America, and getting tubed.
By the way, speaking of scoring, our friends at Waterways, Brian and Sarah, I've been working with them. As you know, I've been wanting to go out to Fiji to go surfing and foiling. And I went ahead and pulled the trigger. So I'm going to be going out to Tavarua. And like I said, the guys at Waterways, Brian and Sarah, made it so easy for me to figure it all out, the bookings, like it is everything we always say about Waterways, completely professional, the experts in surf travel. So I'll be going there shortly, and I'll give the listeners a little feedback on my trip, but I'm excited about it. I'm in that space where I'm like, what boards do I bring? What foils do I bring? What's going to happen? But which books do I bring? Fun stuff.
Good. I'm super psyched that worked out for you.
I know. I wish you could have come with.
Dude, I'm in a different phase of life. You're talking about going to surf right now. I got to go get my kid to preschool.
Yeah. Well, you're doing the right thing. Good.
Yeah,
good on.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, anyways, that's all I've got for today. I will remind people of those films when they're available to stream.
Hey, dropping tomorrow is the next episode of the Electric Acid Surfboard Test with 𝗕𝗏𝗏, Stab's wonderful series. They've done 2 episodes, so we get to see episode 3 tomorrow. So everyone gear up for that. I'm excited about that.
Me too. Looking forward to it.
Well, look, David, we've said a lot. Until next time, adios and aloha.
Man, fighting something.
Okay,
all right.
buddy.
Have a good day.
Okay, bye.